All right, guys, I've already chosen my second book for 2018, and it's going to be Robbie Robertson's Testimony. That's Robbie Robertson's Testimony. You can read it too, or you can download it by going over to audible.com and use the code ROADIEFREERADIO when you check out to get a free 30-day trial as well as a free audiobook download. If you don't want to read Robbie Robertson's Testimony along with me, then you can find another title because they have thousands and thousands to choose from. Use that code ROADIEFREERADIO. Get yourself a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook download. Let's do the showski.
Hey, all you roadies. This is Michael Lardy from Great White.
This is Katrine Ottosen.
What's happening, roadies? This is Lij Shaw, and you're listening to Roadie Free Radio.
What's up, roadies? My name is Larry Milburn, and this is Roadie Free Radio, your VIP pass to meet and greet the stars behind the scenes of the music and film business. Okie dokie, what's happening, roadies? Welcome to episode number 82. This is your host, Larry Milburn. This is Roadie Free Radio, coming at you from a cold barn in Northwest Connecticut. Today's guest on the show is my buddy, record producer, engineer, home studio, rights fighting battle man, bearded wonder, and a hell of a podcast host is my man Lij Shaw from Recording Studio Rockstars in Nashville, Tennessee. Damn, we got a good episode today. It is a long one. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to be here. It's good to have you back with me. This is my last show before I head out to Anaheim for my first NAMM show. As many of you know, because I haven't shut up about it in the last couple of months, I am so super excited to go to NAMM and check it out and see what the hell the thing is all about. I've mentioned I'm moderating a panel. If I haven't, come and check it out. We've got some great people on the panel. It's Thursday, January 25th from 2 to 3 p.m. at the California Ballroom. It is called Keeping Concerts Safe. We have had some pre-calls with some of the panelists, and it's going to be awesome. Heather Rafter, my friend from Rafter Marsh Law Firm, is going to be up there with me. Jesse Hughes, the lead singer of the Eagles of Death Metal, can't actually make it, but he is sending us a video that we are shooting, and we're going to have him on there. It turns out he's touring, so he can't make it. Dean Correa, longtime head of security for Tom Petty, is going to be on the panel, as well as First Assistant Chief Mike Moore, the Office of Operations at the Los Angeles Police Department, and we've got another special little thing happening. A couple of the people going to join us, and it's going to be pretty damn cool. So, man, I'm super excited, and we're going to see a lot of guests that have been on the show cruising around NAMM as well. I've heard from Tanya O'Callahan, Alex Salzman's going to be there, Robert Scoville, Fela Davis, Greg Looper, Daniel Shotsky's from Gig Gear, my good friends over at Telefunken, my new friends over at airturn.com who supply me with the awesome AirTurn Go stand, my traveling mic stand. They are all going to be there, and plenty more. So I am super psyched to see all of these people and get it on. And I've already looked at a bunch of panels I'm going to sign up for. It's going to be fantastic. All right. And I'm going to see Paloma. You guys know Paloma, my sweet Paloma, who's been with me since the start of the show. She's been working out in Burbank, killing it already, killing it as a cinematographer. And I love it, man. I love seeing her success. So I'm going to see Paloma. She's going to help out, and we're going to get this thing going. So I got to tell you something real quick. I don't want to take up too much time, and I don't want to sound all mushy. But listen, something's going on, man. Those of you folks who have been listening to this show since the beginning, I can't thank you enough. But I want to tell you something. We got some friends. We got some new friends who have decided to come along for the ride. And you guys, it's awesome, man. I can't thank you enough for listening, for your support, for tuning in week after week. I knew when I started this show that these stories were awesome and that they were important to tell. And we all need some good stories in our life. There's been a lot of great stories of inspiration and redemption, which is a theme that I love. And this show's got it, man. This show's got it. These people have been amazing. And I'm just so happy that you guys are responding and that new people are joining us. So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening, my friends. If you're interested, speaking of which, in what I'm going to be bringing to the NAMM show, if that's your thing, to know what gear that I use on the road, I just put up a new video on our YouTube channel. You can check it out there. It's called What's in My Bag NAMM 2018. Pretty fucking crazy title, right? Okay, as if you couldn't guess what was going to be in my bag. So anyway, I go over a bunch of the gear that I use and take with me on the road, and so figured people might find that interesting. So that's up. You can check that out. What else did I have to tell you? Oh, I want to start a little section of the show going forward where I give you, quick updates on some former guests and what they're doing. And I just thought of this last night, so I don't have too many to go. But my point is, if you guys have, if you're going to be on tour, or whatever, you're coming to town, someone's town, hit me up and I'll talk about it on the show. And you guys can find each other out there on the road if you are so interested. The Weight Band, our good friend Jim Weeder, master of the Telecaster guitar, a good buddy of mine and a former guest. He is with the Weight Band doing songs of the band. They kill it. I've known these guys for a while. You got to go see them. The Weight Band's got a whole new slate of shows coming up, and Jimmy Weeder does as well with Masters of the Telecaster, so check that out. Our good buddies Bobby Tees and Brian Spicer are going to be rolling through town with Tedeschi Trucks. They're going to be at the Capitol Theater in New York coming up. I'm going to try to get to those shows, at least one of them, and I'm very excited about that. Hope to see those guys. And our buddy Sean Quackenbush has also got a killer run of shows going on with Brandi Carlile, and you can find her at brandycarlile.com and see where old Sean Quackenbush is going to be. They got a couple of Beacon shows coming up, and I hate to admit it on air, I've never been to the Beacon, and I got to go. Quackenbush, I'm coming for you, dude. You better get ready. Anyway, I'm super excited for them, and again, I'm going to find out some more info from NAMM when I see some of our old friends, Tanya Callahan and Faylad Davis, and see what they got going. But today, we got my buddy Lij Shaw. As I said at the beginning, podcast host, kind of a mentor to me, great dude. And it was kind of humbling to have him on the show because I look up to him and what he does and what he's accomplished. And he's a good dude. If you have not listened to his show, if you are someone who's interested in recording and you want to hear firsthand from some of the most amazing producers and recording engineers working today, Lij gets him on the show. All right. He does a great job. And, he gets into albums and stuff. Super cool. So check that out. He's got a whole story about a fucked up situation going on right now in Nashville. So listen to that. And that's it. My buddy Lij, we're going to hook up in Anaheim, and I'm very excited. All right. So here you go, my friends. Another big shout out. Thank you so much. But right now, we got Lij Shaw.
Hit it. Call yourself a roadie. Call yourself a roadie. Call yourself a roadie.
Lij Shaw, what's happening, dude? Listen, I got to tell you, it as I was setting up the session today in Adobe Audition and typing your name, I was like, this is the craziest thing because of how we initially met, how I found you. You offered a lot of guidance back then. It's just crazy to me that, it started like that. And now I've actually got you as a guest on the show as a prisoner.
I'm honored to be imprisoned on your show, man. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Larry. It's cool what you're doing, and it's just cool to be able to hang out with you and have a chat.
Absolutely, dude. And I I've listened to your show a bunch. I know you haven't listened to mine clearly, but I know.
No.
I know. I've listened to your show a bunch, and I've gleaned a lot of stuff, not only about sort of structuring a show, but also just some cool stories from these amazing producers that you've had on the show, producers, engineers.
Thank you. It's fun to be able to just kind of talk to people about what I'm really into.
Yeah.
Who I think we're all really into in different aspects, and just hear their stories. And it's like, I like to have the approach of being a beginner's mind, like always a student.
Yeah.
And every time I talk to people, whether they've been doing it far longer than me or not as long as me, I always learn something.
Well, let me ask you this. We'll start off with this question. I usually do a deep dive into like the person's personal history. We're going to get there, but since we're on the show, Recording Studio Rockstars, and talking about it and learning, you've done how many episodes now of the show? You started in 2015.
I think I just finished putting together my 132nd interview.
Wow.
So episode wise, I think we're at 120 or 122.
Okay.
And then I always have a few ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise you're scrambling around every single week,
I call those the old host update. I've done 2 of those where I all of a sudden, a couple of guests canceled or something, and I didn't have anybody, so I'll do a little update. But here's my question for you. If you can do it in a short way, because I'm sure you've learned a lot, what have you learned from talking to all these amazing? I mean, you're a recording producer yourself, you're an engineer, you've been around this a lot. You've talked to some amazing people on the show. What have you learned?
One of the questions I ask on the show, always the last one, is I ask people to go back in time, take the studio Wayback Machine, and find their young self and ask them one question. What's the single most important thing? Give their young selves this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. And I would say that really opens up a perspective that's shared across all my guests. It's not always the same answer, but it's something to do with trusting yourself and believing in yourself, Yeah. I think when people start out in anything, but in my case, we're talking about recording music, there is a tendency to look around the world and see other people doing something and think they know how to do it. I don't know what I'm doing. I'd like to be able to do it, but I'm not so sure that that I'm as legit, Yeah. And everybody kind of gets to the end of a long journey and often feels like, man, I wish I had just believed in myself from the get-go, So I feel like that's the takeaway, and that's something I need reminding of all the time.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, like we said, you talk to some pretty heavy hitters, and you're doing it yourself. I mean, do you come away from some of these interviews like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I just should stop.
No, I usually come away just inspired. I mean, I get excited. Yeah, it's fun. I just had a guest on last night. It's a woman who's a songwriter and a producer here in Nashville. And before the interview, I wasn't sure if we would get very technical, and we didn't get super technical about, geeking out on microphones and everything. Yeah. And we just kind of let the interview go towards one of her strengths was having a vision to write songs, start a record label, try and have her records have a lifespan after she finishes them. And like that whole topic, all that stuff was so cool, and it was really inspiring to hear her talk about this stuff and just see somebody be really passionate and committed to making great music.
Yeah. Do you usually come away from your interviews with a couple of nuggets of like, I gotta file that one away and try one day?
Oh yeah. I mean, one that I remember, and I'll always remember, when I had Craig Alvin on the show. He's a wonderful mixer here in Nashville, and he had this everything else bus. It was like his solution to mixing a record and struggling with getting the bass just right and the kick drum, which those are 2 big challenges when you're mixing music. And one of the things that happens is you start out and you get your rhythm section sounding great in a mix, and then you're mixing along into the song, and then more elements are coming in. Now you're in the super chorus somewhere around the bridge and the outro, and you can start feeling like the bass and the kick now are all swallowed up and not sounding all that great.
Right.
And so he came up with an idea that he takes every other instrument and routes them through its own control fader, so that when he hits that point, instead of turning the kick and bass up anymore, which usually was already pushed up against the threshold to sound as good as it could sound.
Yeah.
If you push it any further, it's going to sound crappy.
Yeah.
And so then he just takes the everything else fader, turns it down till it's too low and the kick and bass are too loud, and then he scoots it right back up and just like parks it right in the sweet spot. And now we've got a super chorus where everything's sounding cool and balanced and punchy again.
Wow.
And then he just kind of goes back, and if he has to do some tweaks on the other stuff and pull them back down again, or bring them up anywhere else in the song, he can do that.
Very
It's
cool.
just kind of a cool little, just simple tricks like that where you're like, oh man, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why you make the big bucks.
That's right. That's right, man. All right, Lij, so let's take it back, dude. Growing up in Boston. Born and raised in Boston, right?
Yeah. I grew up in Massachusetts. I actually lived in Brooklyn, New York till I was 6, and then my family moved up to Massachusetts, and sort of, town hopped up there in the suburbs, and I've spent a lot of my life in Concord, Mass.
Okay.
I used to go, it's about 20 minutes outside of the city of Boston, so me and my buddy would take his Chevy Nova into town to go see rock shows.
I was going to say, was music part of the family too?
Yeah, it's in the family, definitely. My dad would sit down and play piano sometimes, and he always sang bass in the church choir,
Yeah.
And my mom, she'd sing some lullabies and stuff like that. But in my extended family, my uncle played guitar. He taught me my first 3 guitar chords at our family summer gathering. And, I have another cousin, Jennifer Kimball, who's up in Boston still, and she's just like an amazing singer and musician and composer as well.
So it was there. It was seeping into you.
It was, yeah. But I still, when I decided to do it, it was outside of the norm. It wasn't like anybody. It wasn't what you did, really.
Right. What did you do? What was your family thing?
Well, I mean, it's like one of the choices for me. When I was in high school, my dad wanted, to know that his son was on the right path. So he took me in to take this fancy test where they I'd fill out the little oval circles with a number 2 pencil.
Oh yeah.
And had to pick up pegs and put them in holes and all these testing things. And I tested out. Turns out I have terrible hand coordination. So that's a struggle right there. I can play some guitar though.
Yeah.
But
you could push a fader or two.
I can push a fader or two. I did test pretty good for ideas. Apparently, I can come up with ideas if I need to. I just can't stick to them as easily.
Yeah.
But so 2 conclusions of this test was like, well, you're good at math and you're good at music, so you should go into. Actually, they talked about music a little bit, but I wasn't really playing anything at that point, so we didn't consider it too seriously.
Yeah.
They said you should go into engineering or architecture. So I ended up deciding to choose a college to go to where I went to architecture school, and I didn't know anything about architecture, man.
Yeah.
I wasn't like I had a passion for architecture.
Right.
I learned to appreciate it, but music was not even really on the list. And when I was in school for architecture over 4 years, doing all my work and trying to make it to class on time,
Yeah.
I got to the end. And I realized that the absolute most fun thing I did during that entire time was playing bands.
What'd you play? Guitar.
Guitar, yeah. But I picked up banjo and I picked up fiddle, and now I'll dabble around on whatever, drums, bass, piano.
Yeah. But
That was tricky. I feel like for me, piano is like figuring out a math problem every time I sit down to do it.
Right. Yeah, I took piano for a little bit, and then guitar pretty much won out. Is that Middle Tennessee State where you went for engineering?
Well, I went to architecture school in St. Louis, so Washington University, and then finished up there because I am kind of a finisher. I will stick to something until I get it done, even if by the time I get it done, people are like, I thought you forgot all about that. And I finished college, and I went off with a buddy of mine. We grabbed our backpacks and went to Europe and traveled around. And then I ended up, of all places, in Hong Kong playing in a blues band for a half a year with my brother.
Wow.
While we were there, we ended up inside a recording studio, and I took a look around, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This has got a lot more blinking lights than an architecture studio.
Yeah.
And so I decided when I came back to the U.S., I really wanted to find a school for recording and just learn how to do it. And again, I didn't know anything about it. Nobody in my family was a professional audio engineer or, working professionally in the music industry other than a second cousin who was a singer at that point.
Yeah.
And I came back and I found MTSU and moved down to Nashville, Tennessee. I'll tell you how ignorant I was. I didn't even know that Nashville was a music city. I didn't even know that like LA, Nashville, and New York were the three music hubs.
That's hysterical because one of my questions was going to be, why did you choose Nashville over LA or New York?
Because I read in the back of Mix magazine that there was this college there called Middle Tennessee State University, and they just built an amazing new facility, this recording industry building with like SSL console studios and all kinds of stuff. And if you lived in Tennessee and were a resident, an in-state resident, tuition was $800 a semester for a full 21 hours of
Oh my God. Wow.
So after my car, I drove all the way down to the South. I'd never been there. And I lived in Nashville for a year, became an in-state resident, and then signed up for college. I went to college for 2.5 years.
What'd you do for that? What'd you do for that year?
Oh, I was the salad bar guy.
Salad bar guy.
Yeah, I got a job working with a catering company here, and moved into a shared house with a bunch of strangers, and got my first waterbed.
Nice. Oh yeah, it was like 90, 91, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. It was 90, 91, 92, and it was an adventure. I remember moving down here and feeling out of place. I looked around at all the people who were different than me, kind of in Nashville in the South, and I was like, wow, these folks are kind of funny looking or something, like that. I'm not so sure. I'm from up north, and then it's funny because that was sort of my initial attitude. And then I settled in and I made friends and I totally love Nashville now. It didn't take long at all. But then I remember one Christmas going back up to visit my family, and I flew up to Boston and I took the subway and I got out and I was at a subway stop and I looked around. I was like, holy crap, what was I thinking? Boston is full of really weird looking people. This is where I used to live. So I love Nashville, still love Boston, but it's kind of funny how your perspective, sometimes you just need to just slow down and just soak it all in before you really understand and get the perspective and realize everybody's pretty cool.
Right, exactly, man. Now, growing up or before you went and got your degree in engineering, were there records, were you curious about records, how they were made, how people got these sounds and all that kind of stuff? Was there something you gravitated toward?
Yeah, so definitely, we grew up listening to records and stuff around the house. My dad had been in Turkey in the Peace Corps in the 1960s. He went over there for the very first Peace Corps, and he had like a small collection of Turkish music records that I remember I'd put on the record player sometimes, and I was like, that sounds so cool, And then my stepdad had a turntable, old Techniques modular, a component stereo, and some of the first records we had in our house, my mom gave my brother for his birthday, decided to give him some records, and went into, this is a great story. She went into the music store in Boston and asked the guy who worked there, said like, my son's turning, whatever, he was 10 or something like that, and I want to give him a record for Christmas. What should I give him? And the guy was like, oh, well, you definitely need to give him this, and handed her Dead Set, the double album live Grateful Dead LP. So that was one of the first records we had around the house.
That's cool. That's in my car.
And I love that record. And I listened to it and I was like, space. I really like space. That's my style right there. Yeah. And then, another record that was really important to me because I was really into video games was, and I used to listen to Dr. Demento, the comedy show.
Yeah.
We had a snow day when I was in 8th grade, and I walked 10 miles from our house through the snow to the Kmart there, and I picked up a brand new copy of Pac-Man Fever, which had just come out.
Wow.
And it was the vinyl record where every song was like a goofy song written after a video game. Songs about Centipede and Space Invader.
So this is what kicked off your recording career.
This is what kicked off my recording career, yeah.
You're a Grammy certified producer who started on Centipede.
But it gets a little better. So my brother and I, I remember at one point we were out at Lechmere. That was the department store in Boston. And we're looking for a new jam box. Nate really wanted to get a jam box. He was starting to get into hip hop and like, break dancing.
Oh yeah.
And we'd go around and the ultimate test for the best sounding stereo was to go up to the cassette deck on it, press the eject button, and if it had like the pneumatic eject and slowly ejected, then that was a quality stereo. So we were going around hitting the eject button on all these different jam boxes and stereos, trying to figure out which one he should get. And I popped a tape out of one that was there as a demo, and it turned out to be Frank Zappa's Apostrophe on cassette.
Wow.
So I was listening to it and I heard like Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, and I was like, oh man, this is like right up my alley, So that kind of kicked off my love of Frank Zappa's music.
Yep.
And I actually I pocketed the cassette, man. I shoplifted it and I took it home with me. I just had to have it. Sorry, Lij Shaw.
Wow. So you were one of the first Napster customers.
Exactly.
You had no problem with that.
But else was kind of I know these are just goofy stories, but there was another song on there. There was also Werewolves of London was on the same mix cassette by Warren Zevon. And I didn't know it was a different artist and a different record that was tacked on. So for the longest time, I thought that Werewolves of London was the last track on Apostrophe by Frank Zappa.
Wow. Liz, you've had quite a circular path into all this, huh?
Yeah, but it's cool. And like I say, I didn't know anything about music and recording music and in it. And I did get a 4-track when, I guess in all fairness, I did have a little bit of an advantage because I was being exposed to stuff, just didn't know it. So the high school I was at, our music teacher was he was an ex-professor from Berklee School of Music, College of Music. So he came to our high school and was teaching the music program, and he took a closet and converted it into a control room, put in a 4-track cassette studio, and had some synthesizers, and I think we had a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel. And I took a recording and music class at that high school, and that was my introduction to how this stuff worked. And we actually did stuff like we did music concrete where we recorded ping pong balls dropping and running water and noise. And then we had to chop up the pieces of tape and like rearrange them and crunch them up and tape them all back together and like make our own compositions of music concrete.
Nice.
So I guess that, in all fairness, that was my introduction. I still didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I still didn't realize that I was being introduced to a career in recording at that point. But that's where I first heard about it.
So what little tidbits did you take out of Middle Tennessee State?
I learned a lot there about the technical side of recording. So they were quite good at helping me understand how MIDI worked and how SMPTE timecode worked and how tape machines worked and, microphones. We had to memorize signal flows for all the consoles. And, a test would be they hand you a blank piece of paper and you had to fill in all the elements of the console and the whole signal flow of the thing. Wow. So it was really great in terms of learning how this stuff worked. I know people sometimes talk about, in this day and age, they talk about the challenge of going to school for recording and how does that connect and how does that teach you to make a record? That's a topic that people throw out there, especially in the online teaching world. But truthfully, I learned a lot of technical stuff. I took electrical engineering classes there. I didn't really learn how to make a record from school. That I feel like I learned through practice. I learned it from my friends. When I got out of school and started interning and working in my first studio, which was Alex the Great over in Berry Hill, then I had a couple of mentors that really knew how to make a great record, and they started teaching me that stuff. Robin Eaton and Brad Jones, 2 great guys, producers. But that technical aspect gave me a huge advantage too, because I came out and I knew how to rewire the patch bay. I could figure stuff out. If something was broken, I could figure out how to make it work. And I thought that was awesome. And then I guess my other takeaway was acknowledging and realizing that 2.5 years of school, just being in a community surrounded by other people who were into the same thing I was doing, learning how to record music, passionate about it, that was a huge opportunity to learn.
Sure. Right. Well, just like you said, being around it, having a network from which to, have a foundation of people to go out and share a love of something is a big help.
It's so important. And you don't always want to recognize that as a kid because you're like, I'm a rebel. I don't need nobody.
Yeah.
Except for this girl over here.
Right. Except for her and maybe her friend. And
yeah. So, I mean, but now I look at it and I realize that if you're into anything, find a community of people that are into it as fast as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too, as you pointed out, is like kids to go to school. Like this happens a lot with Full Sail, right? And then kids going out on the road and thinking like they can just go ahead and do it. But there's a lot. There's living on the road. There's living in a studio. There's the interpersonal skills. There's all that kind of stuff that you're just gonna get by being out there and having time and experience under your belt. But without some of that technical stuff and understanding, I mean, you can learn that obviously, but I don't know. I always go back and forth on, I think the interpersonal stuff somewhat to me outweighs the other stuff,
You mean just learning the skills of dealing with people and stuff?
Yeah, learning skills dealing with people, and I mean that's a large part of it. Even as an editor, 90% of your job a lot of times is being a therapist for a director or producer who comes in. They're looking at their footage for the first time and they're freaking out because they're seeing all these raw takes and nothing's been color corrected, nothing's got audio mixed properly, and they're not seeing it all put together because at that point they can't. They've just been on set, so. It's the same sort of thing.
So that's an interesting topic because I definitely experienced that in the studio and have many times. And it's a pleasure when you can work with somebody that just trusts in your ability as the engineer and the producer that you're going to get it right. It's a pleasure to work with somebody who can also see forward and where it's going to go, and trust that that's where it's headed, even when it's not there. But the truth is, in a lot of situations, it's fair that somebody whose job it is to just decide whether it's great or not. Until it's great, it's a guessing game, and
right.
We are kind of compelled as engineers and producers to present things as well as possible every time we present it, so that people have a chance to really understand it, or at least until you got a great trusting relationship going with whoever you're working with, and they're just like, all right, everything's good. It's like when I hire somebody to, build something at my house, and when I was doing stuff with my studio a long time ago, there's all this stress around, oh my gosh, I'm like, well, are we gonna get it right and everything? And then they do a couple of things, and you're like, oh, I don't even know what I'm talking about. He just did that thing, and it looks great.
Right. Right. Do you approach new bands or new artists that come in that, let's say, have never recorded? Do you approach them differently than you approach a more seasoned artist?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. On the one hand, I don't, because I try and approach every artist that I work with with a real service mentality. Like I'm literally the doorman of a fancy hotel for them, and I'm just trying to help them, usher them in, make them feel super comfortable. If it's an experienced artist, they may know a lot about what it is that they want and need out of the session to get rolling. And it's my job to just talk to them and find out as much as I can to start out.
Yep.
And if it's an inexperienced artist, it's still the same thing. I'm just finding out different stuff. I'm having to find out more about the earlier stage of their process, and I'm having to translate that into, well, that if you want this, then that translates to meaning this is what kind of setup we should do. Whereas, an experienced artist, you might be able to just say, you thinking a no headphone session, click, no click, an inexperienced artist, you might not mention the click at all. You might wait until they're playing, and then you might suggest it or say, hey, maybe we should try a with and without click, and then let you hear it and see which one feels better or something like that.
Gotcha.
Just the technical stuff,
Yeah. How much time do you spend sort of in pre-production, talking with an artist beforehand?
Well, ideally you spend.
And what do those
of time.
Conversations look like?
Well, they've looked like different things for me in the past. I've done records where pre-production has been rehearsing with the band in a rehearsal space and really taking sweet time to do things. I've done pre-productions where we've demoed it all out in a rehearsal space on a 4-track cassette and then brought it back up to the studio to continue demoing it out, and going to the really making the full-on record later. I've done ones where pre-production is nothing more than getting to know the song and charting it out and having a conversation with the songwriter, the artist, and then on the day of the session, bringing the band, hand them a chart, and jump right into it. So they're all different, but any way you slice it, I've always found that being prepared is the best way to go in. Mm-hmm. Or at least
listening to their music, spending time with them.
Yeah. So more often than not, if I'm working with somebody who's an independent artist, they don't have a lot of budget. So they don't have 4 extra days of budget for, having a paid band, for example, rehearsing in a studio. If it's their own band, it's easier to do that. It's just me and my time to show up and check it out. But just that process. Sometimes also, preparation, you don't want to do too much preparation. That could just be procrastination.
Right.
Well, it also doesn't just get going.
Gets in the way of the sort of raw feeling.
But I definitely think that the most valuable aspect of pre-production is simply sitting down, picking up a guitar, learning the song that you're about to record, charting it out, and understanding the structure of the song, the chord movements, just understand what's going on with it. Because a lot of times I hear it in my head quickly and I get it in my head quickly, but there's still like a big leap between getting it on a gut level and really knowing what's going on with the chords there, you know?
Right.
And that just makes it so much easier if you have some sort of, so I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and we use something called the Nashville number system down here where you write out a chart and you say, IN at the top left for intro. And then you can put down, like 1, 4, 5, 5. And those would be 4 bars of the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 5 chord. And so you chart it out like that where you've got this arrangement. But that, even if you don't use that, even if you put down letters for the chords, or even if you just put down your own chicken scratch, as long as you have a roadmap that you can look at and the other musicians are looking at too, so you have a common language, it just makes it so much easier to communicate in the studio and move forward quickly.
Right. Because
it's such a bummer to be like, that thing just before that one spot where everybody goes ding, ding, ding. You know what I mean, right? and then like, 8 hours later and everybody's exhausted and you haven't finished recording the intro.
Right. And Nashville definitely has its thing, right? I mean, there's sort of like, the structured times of the day in terms of recording, right? And how studios are run. I mean, take me through some of that stuff.
So Nashville has traditionally been a union musician town. I was actually I'm about to reference a movie that's not in Nashville, but the Muscle Shoals movie was, and I had Matt Gaden on the show recently. He's one of the original Nashville Cats, and he talked about the difference between working in Nashville and then going down to Muscle Shoals to work. And Nashville was like, you have a 4-hour session, you come in, you have to knock out 5 songs as quick as you can, then there's a break, then everybody comes back in for the next 4-hour session. So it's real factory style, which has both its benefits and its drawbacks. It's got benefits of like producing a whole lot of music and recording a whole lot of stuff and just generating tons of stuff. The drawback is you maybe never really like get lost in an idea until you forget where you are and then like something magical comes out.
Right.
He described it as
there's that Space Jam coming in.
Oh yeah, man, Space Jam. That's where it's at, man. So let's take up a half a side of a double LP with space. How cool is that?
Find our way back into a little Sugar Mags or something.
Hell yeah. So I mean, like working like that. I mean, I've done both. My first records were wake up in the morning, go into the studio, work all day with the band. Start time is sort of like when everybody gets there and everybody's feeling ready to work, and then go till dinner, which is usually too late. Like everybody goes a little till they're too hungry. And then you take a dinner break, and then you come back again after dinner, and then you just work until it's 2 a.m. and you're exhausted and you're dropping. And I've done sessions where we weren't even showing up at the studio till 4 a.m. We were going home at 9 a.m.
Right.
The vampire sessions.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I tried all those because it was an experience to have. But I'm definitely doing the ones that I prefer the most now, which is I finally adopted kind of a family style schedule and routine that says I really just want to work Monday through Friday, 10 to 6, 8-hour days, take my weekends off, kind of enjoy some life like the rest of the world does.
Yeah.
Not miss it all. So, that's kind of been my approach to it. And I find there's a lot of value to all of them. Taking forever in the day gives you that opportunity to get lost in something, forget where you are.
Yeah.
You probably have more accidents happen. Not always. Sometimes you're just deliberating over something too long.
Right.
And there are no accidents. But working on a really regimented schedule gives you the chance to just kind of get focused and like really know that you got to get something done. We were talking about this on the podcast yesterday, actually, about the definition of art and how it's like, you need to understand your creative boundaries on what you're trying to create before you can begin to create the art. Right.
Yeah.
And so that could translate into maybe one of your creative boundaries is you're only working on 1-inch 8-track tape and there's the limitations of the machine and everything has to happen within that framework. Maybe another boundary is we only have 4 hours to do this from start to finish. So that's the time is our boundary. But whichever boundary you choose, well, I guess what's a boundary to working all day? I guess those are different boundaries. Those are probably like exhaustion boundaries. You just become physically tired and your mind does things that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. I don't know. But like once you establish that creative boundary around what you're doing, then that's the moment at which you really get creative. You come up with a great idea. You come up with a great solution to a challenging problem. Yeah. And start doing really interesting stuff, I think.
I just had a systems tech on the show a couple of weeks back, Hank Fury. And he came up through the whole.
Now that's too bad. That's not a great name, right?
Right. It's a pretty awesome name.
I said that wrong. That was my way of saying that's a great name.
Yeah, he came up through the whole CBGB's punk world in New York and SIR and whatnot, and it was basically drilled into him. When he left CBGB's and started touring out in vans and whatnot, and he'd go to these places where stuff was broken. Rather than kind of complain about the stuff being broken or tell the local house person, hey, your shit's broken and it's not, I can't use it. It was drilled into him, use what you have. And with that, make rock and roll, basically, Yeah,
that's cool. We talked about that too. We were talking about using like a crappy mic or something that's got a little bit of a buzz to it. This was Femke Videma yesterday, who was on the podcast or being interviewed. She's coming later. But she talked about, you take these funky sounds and instead of complaining about it or feeling like it's bad and don't you wish you had a better mic, take that sound and like make that the creative expression. Yeah. And so that's cool. I can see the same thing for a live show like that. Like, that especially if you're doing punk rock, I mean, CBGBs or whatever, it's right. Like that may be the ultimate sound one day. People will be like, oh my God, if I could just have a plug-in that made it sound like that PA that you used on that one gig.
Right, exactly. The crap PA from whatever town. Let's go back to Alex the Great Recording and Brad Jones and Robin Eaton. You've talked about them as being mentors. What are a couple of things you learned from those guys straight away?
Well, okay, so one of the things I learned from Robin right off the bat was to just be a good dude. He's just like, he's such a loving, awesome, generous person that he makes it incredibly fun to be working together all day, incredibly fun to be in the studio, full of great ideas. He also is great at calling bullshit on stuff when it's getting too complicated. Yeah. He's like, if it starts to not be cool anymore, he'll call it quickly. He'll be like, nah, it was better when it was this, and that was a cool thing. I think just having a really creative attitude, those guys just, like their sense of style is it's just light years beyond mine, Yeah. So I learned tons from them about that kind of stuff. Great artwork on the walls. Brad really taught me a lot about the engineering aspect of things too, and really being organized. He taught me to understand how to manage a session in the music and work with musicians in the studio. That was something I didn't know anything about in school. Like I say, I learned the technical stuff. But when I got into a studio and I was working with Brad and there's other musicians on the other end of the microphone and the talkback, all of a sudden it's like, the littlest details become so important. Knowing how to go in and out of input on a track at the right time so that, you're able to do an accurate punch in on somebody or just, make sure somebody's headphones are right. I mean, that was something he really had to drill in me. It took me, I wanted to keep tweaking sounds. And he was like, man, get those headphones into input as fast as possible, because the musicians, all the magic's coming from the musicians playing the music on this session.
Right.
And they need to be able to start working on the song as quickly as possible. Like the little extra tweak I was doing on the snare drum thing, that's not the one that's going to make this thing really important.
Yeah,
it helps,
right.
But it's, it's getting them to play. And so I learned a ton about just working with people and just managing, it's like managing the transport,
Yeah.
I guess that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And for those folks listening that don't know what a transport is.
Yeah, so transport is the play, stop, rewind, fast forward buttons and record buttons, whether you're on an analog tape machine, whether you're on an ADAT. We were using ADATs when I first started out there.
Yep.
And then later in Pro Tools, getting into Pro Tools and managing that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed now still, kids come to intern with me out of school and they don't know what input and auto input are on Pro Tools. And I guess it's old school terminology, although I don't really know what else you'd call it.
Right.
But fellas, ladies, go out there and learn what auto input is and input. It's very, very important. It's probably more important than a lot of things you use in the studio.
Do you have interns that come through you?
I do. I have had a number of great interns, and I will have some more in the future. Things are in flux right now with my studio. I don't know if we were talking about this before, but Nashville I have a home studio.
Yep. It's
called the Toy Box Studio. Nashville has a very draconian restriction on home businesses that says you can work from your home, but you're not allowed to have a customer over to your house. So that means anybody, if somebody wants to cut hair and they want to have somebody come over and cut hair at their house, they can't do it. If you are editing a film in Nashville and you wanted to have the client come over and, proof the edits on your laptop on the dining room table, that's not allowed. And so technically all home recording studios in Nashville are not allowed to be making records professionally with customers and clients in the studio.
Wow.
Which is nuts, right?
That's crazy. And it's funny because I thought that this situation going on was specific to your situation at Toy Box.
It's only specific to my situation because in 2015, somebody filed a complaint against me, and then the city codes came and gave me a cease and desist letter for my studio.
Got it.
And the way that works is Metro Codes Department has a website form. And so anybody can go and anonymously file a web form complaint against somebody else. And then the city just comes down and drops the hammer on you. So it's this weird turn in your friends and neighbors kind of thing. I had never, ever had a complaint from a neighbor about my studio. I have a great relationship with all my neighbors. Yeah. And it was kind of a long story, which I'll compress for you. But that happened. And then I spoke to some friends and spoke to a local lawyer and finally spoke to the local press, anonymously did an article telling my story. And two law firms reached out to me, the Institute for Justice and the Beacon Center, which both specialize in economic liberties and property rights. And they said, we want to help you with your situation because this is you're going through exactly the kind of thing we're designed to help with. And so for the past couple of years, I have been fighting back this restriction from the city, and the past year, I and a co-plaintiff who's actually a woman who named Pat, who just wants to run a salon chair as a retiree from her garage. She wants to just be able to do people's hair. We both applied for a rezoning. That was the first thing we did, and I had 40 signatures on a petition of my neighbors all around me supporting, saying we absolutely love having him here and think it's fine to have a studio and want him to be able to do it. 7 written letters to the council, 50 emails sent to every Metro Council member, and 15 of my neighbors came out during rush hour traffic and paid for parking to just be at the public hearing to show support. And despite all this, the council still voted no for me to have a rezoning so that I could work from my studio in the only way that they allowed at that time. So fast forward, and just this past year in December, we filed a lawsuit against the city of Nashville. So I'm a boy called Sue Nashville right now.
Holy shit, man. That is ridiculous. Do you have any sense of who started this law?
No, it's who started the law? No, I don't know. I think it's been on the books since the 70s or something like that.
Do you think it was designed?
It's old. It's not recent. It's an old thing.
But do you think it was designed to sort of keep the recording business? I guess it's for all across the board. Doesn't matter.
That's the thing. You know, it's easy for us to want it to be all about us, but it's not. It just happened to be all about me and getting, the hammer dropped on me with this cease and desist. But the restriction is on all home businesses. So, more often you hear people use an example of like, well, I don't want, an auto mechanic right next door. I don't want like an auto shop or something like that.
Right.
Which I ironically, even that is like, come on, really? Like, you never had a neighbor fix their car before? Like, is it right? It's just, I live a block from the auto diesel college here in Nashville, and they rev race car engines over there. And there's a train a block the other direction, and right behind my house is a daycare. And actually, when I moved in, my neighbor, real great old character who's not living anymore, but he was running a junkyard in his backyard. which was sanctioned by the city because he actually had a contract with Metro to junk street lamps in his backyard. So it's like it all makes no sense, and I am in a unique position now because I got singled out and because I have a great team to step up to the plate for everybody who's making records in Nashville and try and really make a change to fix this thing that's been broken for decades.
That is crazy. So you've basically not been able or legally allowed to record in your home studio for the last 2 years.
Neither have I been able to legally record for 2 years, but legally, none of us have ever been able to record for any years.
Right.
And that's still the case,
Yeah.
So I'm trying. So it's absurd. I mean, we have TV shows about home studios, famous musicians all over the television, all in Nashville,
Yeah.
Some of the greatest records ever were made in home studios around here. And I'm just trying to help do something about it because it's one of these things where it's not everybody getting a cease and desist letter every day, but it could be anybody.
Right.
Just like it was for me, like it has been for other people.
Sure.
And there's no telling. And that's just no way to make a living. I feel like, music is hard enough as it is to living as a musician, as an engineer in a recording studio, producer. Let's not make it harder by making it, not even allowed.
That is the craziest thing, man. Wow.
Yeah.
So,
hashtag Save Home Studios.
Save Home Studios, indeed. So, what's also crazy is Nashville's had this boom in the last, 10 years?
Yeah, it's blowing up here, man. There is so much building going on. Gosh, what was it? 1,000 people a month or something like that. Like 100 people a day moving to Nashville. That wasn't very good math. Sorry about that. But then whatever the number is, it's always impressive when I hear it. So I'm trying to convey that. But there's so many people moving to Nashville and so much building going on, and it's just completely booming. I think it's really exciting. Some people, rightly get frustrated because traffic is worse now and stuff like that. But, I moved down here because I wanted to do something exciting, and it's pretty cool to see that, things are really hopping down here.
Absolutely. But I mean, with all those people coming in, surely there's a large percentage of those people wanting to do home businesses or work from home because everybody can now. And I got to imagine this thing's going to get overturned or changed or something. I mean,
it might take a minute, and it might take somebody as crazy as myself to light a fire under Nashville's rear end to get this to really happen. But I'm happy to do it. In fact, I love Nashville. And if I can have anything to do with helping the world point their finger at Nashville and snicker about not being able to make music in Music City, I am all for it.
Yeah.
If it says that we're all making music again,
Damn, man. All right. Well, let's
being allowed to rather, because we are making. Everybody's making music in Nashville.
Right. Of course. So tell me about Toy Box Studio. Break it down for us. What's going on there? You got a custom built MCI board?
Yeah, so I have a control room that on the left side has analog tape. I've got MCI JH16 2-inch 16-track, 24-track tape machine. Right next to it is a JH110 2-track 1/4-inch. And then on the right side is Pro Tools HDX, outboard gear. I've got some beautiful old Calrec mic pre's and compressors, 1176, the usuals. And then at the center, up front, is a custom-built console. It's an MCI that Jeep Harned built for Criteria Studio C in the 1970s. So this very same console that I have in my studio lived in Miami all through the 1970s. It's the same console that did Hotel California for the Eagles, the Bee Gees' Staying Alive and Saturday Night Fever, We're an American Band, Grand Funk Railroad, the Grease soundtrack.
Get the fuck out of here. It was all recorded on your console?
It was all recorded on my console, yeah.
Dude, that's insane.
It's a really cool thing, man. It's like having this really cool old car sitting right in front of you while you're working, So it's not like a new console. It's like an old console, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's so cool. And it's so much fun. It's really playful to work on. It's a split console so that the left channel or the left side panel is all mic pre's and routing, and it has this touch sensitive routing matrix up top that looks like old 70s elevator buttons or something. You just reach up and you touch it with your finger and it makes contact and it lights up, and that will route the signal to one of the bus outputs. And then on the right panel is the mix return section, and all the faders are airplane style, so they come up, they're curved. I guess they're called Pantone faders.
Wow.
And I'll use everything in my studio in a real hybrid fashion. So I'm a big believer in, pull the best out of each thing that you're using. So the console mic pre's are great for recording. They sound awesome. They're just like tons of iron in these and transformers and just sound really good. The tape machine sounds fantastic. It's got the qualities of tape. The EQ is wonderful. The compression is wonderful. It just makes things sound big and expansive and rock and roll.
Yeah.
And I will transfer that right into Pro Tools and work in Pro Tools from there. So I do this hybrid setup. And the mix side of the console, I use in a couple of different ways. I used to, before the city came and shut down my website and shut down my I had a YouTube channel called Stereo Sessions where I was bringing in local bands, and a band would perform and we'd shoot videos with iPhones, and I was just creating content for local bands to help them build their fan base and have videos showing them play music. And the city had me shut that down, which was kind of that's a whole nother topic, right?
What the fuck, man? And they shut your website down too?
Well, my website's there, but I had to, take down my rates and remove the video. I had a welcome video on the front page that said, "Come make a record with me," and she made me take that down. Damn. So I got beat up, dude.
Yeah.
So let's see, what was my point? So when I do the live stereo sessions, the band performs, I just do the same thing, which I've done at my Bonnaroo hay bale studio for 14 years down at Bonnaroo, where I mix through the console live while the band's playing. I just mix it live to 2-track, no multi-tracks at all, Yep.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, and that was a really fun way to mix through the console. It's limiting, but it sounds cool as shit,
I bet. Yeah, man.
Fun to work that way. And if you want to check out any of those videos, just go to stereosessions.com and you can see the videos that we did. But I'll use the mixing side of the console for that. And then the other way I really like to use it is in the recording process. So if I'm going to do multiple mics on a guitar amp, I can route them through the faders and pull up different combinations. And it's a great way to get quick and interesting tones on a guitar. Well, a little less quick in terms of you have to sort of patch things in properly and get it going.
Right.
Once you have a few mics on a guitar amp on faders, you can reach up and do different combinations of the faders and push them around, and you just get different tones out of the guitar, and it's such a cool way to record it. And then you just take the output, maybe run it through the 1176 and record it in pre-blended into Pro Tools, and that's your guitar sound. But that sounds really great. In fact, you would hear that. I have a record called Skadoosh, Skad, SKOOSH. And if you go to skadooshmusic.com, that all the guitars that I did there and played myself are all, blended through the console faders like that.
So wait a minute, hold on. How did you find the console?
Well, there's this wonderful resource on the internet called eBay.
And it was just for sale on eBay.
It's for sale on eBay. Yeah, it actually didn't sell on eBay. It was up, and it was like, a make an offer deal, and it's co-owned. So if I don't get the name right, I think it's Joe Tuffarelli, or it was the guy who in Long Island who refurbished it and really loved this console and got it going. And Carla Harned, Jeep's widow, out in Colorado, they co-owned it together, and so they were trying to move it to a new owner. And then I was on there. I was interested. It didn't end up selling, but I kept talking to them for a year. I was like, man, I really like this console. It's cool. You guys should think about letting it make some records. And it was actually on its way to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They decided that they were going to donate it to the collection, and I just kept calling them. I was like, you guys, I think there's some more records we can squeeze out of this thing, And so eventually they agreed to just let me be the new owner, and sent it down here. I put it in my studio. And then, this same console, Hotel California and Saturday Night Fever, took Record of the Year Grammys. I think it was 78 and 79 or 77, 78 back to back. And we were really proud to take it back and get a Grammy again in 2015 for Mike Farris' Shine for All the People was mixed on my console at the Toy Box Studio. So so it's a good story because in fact, there were some more records to squeeze out of that board.
Damn. That is awesome. Have you ever been able to have like a producer or engineer or artist or anybody from that time who recorded that thing come in and like sit there and be like, wow, I remember this thing?
I just interviewed Matt Gaden, who I said was one of the original Nashville Cats as a session guitar player. And he was telling stories of being down at Criteria, working on that board at the Criteria Studios and having both the Eagles and the Bee Gees. And I think Fleetwood Mac maybe was there at the same time. So he was telling stories about that time being in the studio with all those records going on in different studios at the same time.
Oh, dude, that is so awesome.
That's pretty cool, dude. That's pretty cool.
Any pictures from that time of like any band, people standing over the board? Have you ever found any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I need to do a better job of collecting that. There's one famous job of Bill Simzik sitting at the console with the Eagles era. But I need to find more stuff. I mean, it's almost like it's far back enough, and maybe people were focused on other things down in Miami in the sunshine during the 1970s than taking, really, really methodical photographs.
For you.
Yeah, in fact, there was probably, based on some of the things that were happening in the studio at that time, there may have been a policy of not taking photographs, if you know what I mean.
Right, I do. I bet that board has some scars on it, though. If that board could talk, man.
Yeah, I think the story I got from Joe when he was first telling me about it is that they reupholstered the leather armrest, and like a 1/4 ounce bag of weed just like fell out of shakings, from all the joints that had been rolled on it.
Oh, man. All right, so let's talk microphones at the Toy Box. What do you got? What's your favorite? What's the go-to?
I've got more mics than I know what to do with. It's one of those things, I guess, as a filmmaker too, for yourself, you probably have a lot of lenses, that's probably a tool that you end up with a lot of.
I don't have enough.
There you go.
That's how I look at it. I don't have enough at this point.
So microphones are like that, I think, when you're recording. I'm not a virtual instrument guy. I'm a real instrument guy. So having great mics is what you need to get sounds.
Yep.
And so I've got dynamic mics. I've got ribbon mics, condensers. One of my favorite, the mic that I really love and really decided to invest in and get is a U67. So I've got a beautiful U67 that came over from Germany. And there's Bill Bradley is the mic guy here in Nashville, and he helped me, refurbish it and get it into great working shape, and it just sounds beautiful. But I've got a number of other mics that are newer than that. A sponsor on my podcast right now is Roswell Pro Audio. Matt McGlynn he's making some beautiful mics that are really wonderful, wonderfully affordable for home studios. The Mini K47 is this great little K47 capsule mic that's FET design, and it sounds killer on drum. It pretty much sounds killer on everything. I've got video coming out that'll be coming out very soon. Might be out by the time this is out, where I took a pair of those into the studio and I wrote a song, goofy little song, but I recorded everything with just the K47, and I put that all together into a video so you can see what it sounds like on everything from drums, bass, guitars, vocals, piano, and pedal steel.
Wow. Are you a pedal steel player too?
No, but my roommate at the time was a pedal steel player. So I was like, of course we need pedal steel on this song.
Absolutely.
That's one of the, so let me bring that up too, because that is another thing that is very Nashville that I am forever grateful for. I had no idea when I moved here that the pedal steel is this incredible instrument. I think, we think about it as like the crying, whiny slide guitar, if you're not really paying attention to it. But you come here and you work with a pedal steel player, and this is an instrument that is every bit as complex and huge as a grand piano. Yeah. As far as like what's possible on it. And it's just been such a pleasure, such an honor to be able to work with some of the world's greatest pedal steel players in the studio and watch them work this instrument that has 10 strings on it or something like that. And, you can have up to 5 pedals down below, and a volume pedal and plays and finger picks and slides. And it's just like, multiple pickups. It's so complex, and it can be incredibly expressive. So anyway, I just recommend, if you haven't really paid attention to pedal steel, go pick up a pedal steel record and just like, I'm trying to think if I have an example. I think of Speedy West as far as like the old 1950s pedal steel, like the Western swing kind of thing. Sure. But it's just such a great instrument. It's capable of much more than you ever realized.
Lij, do you ever find yourself in a recording rut? And how do you get out of that rut?
Well, every day, and I usually start by being a guest on somebody else's podcast so I can avoid going into the studio and getting started for the day. Recording ruts. First thing that comes to mind for me when I think of a rut is as a guitar player, when you pick up a guitar and I play this, and the first chord I strum is an A chord, and it's always the same A chord, and it's like, come on, man, can't you think of anything new to do? Yeah. So I'm trying to think of the analogy for that for recording, and I think the analogy is you learn to want to get things done in the studio, and when you want to get things done, it means that you have to go for the right answer more quickly. And so you begin to know, like, well, this is how you get a good sound, so I'm going to just do this. And for me, it's particularly drums. Drums would be like the obvious thing. It's like, it's very easy for me to do a session, just go, okay, well, I'm just going to, have the space pair of overheads, and I'll close mic all the drums, and I'll put my ambient mic over here again, and I'll even use this same mic again, and I'll put my 2 room mics up over the loft again, and I'll use those same mics again. And it's easy to just fall into doing the same thing over and over for that. And a lot of times those are good choices. That's why I arrived at them. I use certain mic pre's with EQ on it for the kick and the snare, because those are the ones I'm going to want to EQ, Yeah. And the other ones I might not need to till I'm mixing. But at the same time, every time I push that out of that boundary and then out of that comfort zone, and I try something brand new, well, I shouldn't say every time, because sometimes you try something new and it sounds like shit. But a lot of times you push that boundary. You go try something minimal miking, or you try something with one mic, or you just try something totally different, and it sounds amazing. And all of a sudden you're excited about making music again. Yeah. So I think that's the rut, is like just trying to strike that balance between falling back on a technique that is going to work because it's going to solve what you need to solve right now, versus being willing to try something new so that you inspire yourself and experiment. When I worked with Steve Albini, he talked about that process in his studio years ago. And he said that he tries to, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly his philosophy on everything, but at the time he said he tries to use one new thing on every session. Because it's almost like one new thing is enough to show you something new, to learn a little bit, to keep experimenting, to keep the creative thing going, but have enough of a backup of the reliable stuff that, you know, your band you're recording isn't leaving going like, what the hell just happened, man? This sounds terrible.
Right, exactly. Now, you also have Toy Box Hay Bale, which you mentioned, which is your live recording, your sort of mobile thing that you do at Bonnaroo and somewhere else. Where is that?
No, it's at Bonnaroo. So
Bonnaroo.
There was also the Pilgrimage Festival. We did one there 1 year, but that hasn't really taken off yet. Shout out to you, Brent. Let's get that happening. But the Bonnaroo Festival is a huge festival just south of Nashville. 80 to 100,000 people every year. You know, like 100 bands playing over 4 days. It is an awesome, awesome experience. Every year, I wish I could go back to being 20 again, just so I could go to this thing and really enjoy it, like you do when you're 20. But for the past 14 years, I have been the one who takes a portable recording studio down to the backstage area, sets it all up inside a double wide trailer. Then we take, we get bales of hay from a local farmer, and we encase the entire trailer in bales of hay so that when you walk up to it, it looks like a giant bale of hay with a couple of doors coming out of it. And that gives it soundproofing because you're right in this loud, you know, there's trucks driving by, it's backstage, these huge stages, subwoofers kicking. And this makes a soundproofed recording studio out in the middle of a hayfield, a farm field. And so what we do is we team up with radio stations. I partner up with a group that does all the scheduling of bands, and we might have 20 DJs from stations actually physically on site at Bonnaroo, sleeping in party buses and doing interviews with bands, and another 20 radio stations that are linked up through the internet. So ultimately, what happens is we'll schedule bands to come through the studio, and each band gets 1 hour in my studio. They walk in the door. I say, hey, how you doing? So glad you're here. And, you know, tell us about what you got for a lineup. They tell me what they want to do. And then I set them up, or we set them up with my crew as quickly as possible. I walk into the little control room, pop on my headphones, and they're pulling up through the console. And then I just say, what's the title of the first song? And they say it. All right, let's do it. And they just start playing, and I just mix it on the fly down to 2-track while they're singing. And my mastering guy, Joe Hutchinson, will capture the masters in the back of the control room, master it immediately, and within an hour, it's playing on 40 radio markets around the country, or it's at least available to all of them, you know?
That is awesome.
So it's pretty wild. You know, we'll do over 100 songs recorded, mixed, and mastered in a weekend.
Wow.
And, you know, we've done easily over 1,000 songs since we started doing this, and it's all name artists. I mean, it's everybody from like Jack White to Tori Amos to, you know, I don't know, name a band. You know,
right. That is so cool, man. And what do you bring? What's your sort of, you know, basic gear setup in there?
Well, I've always changed it around a little bit, but ultimately for a long time, well, actually, no matter what I do, I always bring mics, a 24-channel Snake, enough mics to record a drum set, bass, keyboards, 2 acoustic guitars, 2 electric guitars, 2 lead vocals, 2 background vocals, and then spare mics, because you could have a session that goes from a regular, you know, 5-piece band lineup, and the very next session comes in and it's like, you know, a hot brass band from New Orleans, and it's 12 brass instruments that all want to like load in the room. And then we had, you know, or then the next one comes in and it's a vocal gospel group.
Right.
So you're constantly having to shift around, but by keeping it, you know, basic for the band, we can just repatch some things and kind of accommodate anybody. That comes over into the control room, immediately hits the console so that I can just do a mix right through the board. That output goes to the mastering. We try and split the console and capture multi-track at the same time so that it's archived for later remixes.
Yeah.
And I've done a couple of remixes over 14 years, but really not many.
Yeah.
Not many.
What's the console you bring in?
Well, I bring different ones. I've started out with a Mackie 16 track the very first year, little 1604. And then we moved on to the Midas Venice console, which was a great little, like, about a little bigger than the Mackie console, but pretty great sounding. And then we took the SSL console down there. I took the SSL AWS a few years, and I've taken my Soundcraft DC 2000 down there. And that actually, believe it or not, has proven to be one of the best sounding boards out of all the stuff I've taken down. So that's a second console that I have here that just sort of waits patiently for Bonnaroo every year. And then this past year, we finally really broke the mold and decided to do something different. And I took the PreSonus Studio Live 32 Series 3 console. It's a digital board down. Wow. And it was honestly for me, it felt like a real risk move. Like I was like, man, how do I know if this is going to work? It's a lot on the plate to go down. And I'm not doing this every weekend. It'd be easier to tweak your setup and your system if you did the same thing every weekend.
Sure.
But since it's once a year, what we have to do is we have to preset this stuff up in my console, in my studio here in Nashville, and do a dry run of everything, test out every possibility. Because when you go down there, it's an hour away. You're in a farm field, and you've got big name acts that have 1 hour to record with you. And if something's not working, you're screwed. You have to just make sure everything's going to flow beautifully. But we took a digital board down, and I used the onboard mic pre's. I brought my Calrex because I've always used those for the vocal chain and the acoustic, and it just this sounds great, but it also gives a consistency. And I've also taken my Master Reverb Spring reverb. It's like a rack unit spring reverb down. That's always that's the one thing. It's a constant. No matter what we do every year, I always have a spring reverb in the back there.
That is awesome. Do you bring in the back line as well, or no? You don't worry about that part?
Yeah, we do. I have to bring the back line too. So I start out by backing a 17-foot U-Haul truck up in front of my studio in the driveway, and then I fill that with recording gear and backline and take it all down there, and we set everything up from scratch.
What do you bring? What do you bring for the backline?
It takes us 10 days. We record for 4 days, and it's 10 days of ass-kicking work.
Wow. And where are you sleeping? You sleep at a hotel or no?
Yeah, we do. They got some really wonderful rat bag motels down there, and we go sleep in those at night.
Wow, man, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, so it's been a really cool experience, and it's some of the most inspiring music I've had the honor to work on. It's taught me tons and tons about the power of moving quickly and not overthinking things. I was really amazed the first times I did it, and I started to listen to recordings that I did that way, 3 songs recorded and finished in an hour versus a record I labored on over the studio. And then I listened to the studio record. I'm like, why does this not sound as good as the thing we did in an hour?
Right.
And, a combination of things. One was a lot of that setup was analog microphones through cables right through an analog console mixed down to 2-track, and that was the only capture. So things weren't over manipulated and over converted and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then also just the simplicity of letting the band perform the sound that you're trying to get,
Yeah.
And when you're mixing live like that, I recommend it to anybody. Try it if you can. But you're mixing live, and then you feed that mix back through the headphones to the band. So that's the way we work down there. Sometimes people will do a no headphones thing, but if they have headphones on, it means they're hearing what you're hearing, what they are sending to you over the mics. They're hearing how you're responding to that with the mix. That's coming back into their headphones. If you do live effects and things like that, that informs them, and it becomes a dialogue, a musical dialogue between you, the mixer, and the band performing. And I think there's a huge value in that because people are inspired to perform when it's inspiring to perform.
Right. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end of our time. But this week, my man, you and I are going to hook up at NAMM. My first NAMM. You've been before, but it's been a while for you. Are you excited?
I've never been to Winter NAMM. I've been to Summer NAMM here in Nashville, but Winter NAMM's going to be pretty cool, man. I'm excited. Looking forward to it. I still don't even have a plan. I mean, I'm going, but I haven't scheduled anything yet.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to kind of make a few, sort of line up some interviews with people, just make sure I'm around some cool people with some cool opportunities. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. I have a lot of fun jumping around from booth to booth. When I see a manufacturer that's doing something cool, I'll go do a little interview and shoot a quick video with them.
Yep.
And what I've learned, because I did this when I saw you at AES New York this fall too, it's a ton of work. It is so much work.
It is, right?
But it's really fun, man. I guess that's why we got into creative stuff in the first place. Like the reward of creating something and making something that's out there to share with people, and in our case to help people too.
Right.
Is enough of a reward that it's, it can really motivate you to go work your ass off creating something. So that's what I'm gonna do. It's just fun to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. It's gonna be a blast. I'm super psyched for this.
I wish I could say I was just going to do shots of whiskey with everybody, but while I like a good shot of whiskey, literally the second day after I do those shots of whiskey, I'm just like done.
It's the worst.
I'm hungover and miserable. So it'll be a little bit of party, but not too much.
Are you staying till Sunday, Monday? What are you doing?
I'm doing a full week, man. I'm going early. I'm going to see I'm going to go to the artist the Endorsee Expose, I think is the new name of it. Randy Fuchs has a wonderful pre-NAMM thing where I have a chance to really interact with some special manufacturers and products and just see what they're doing and really interact with them. And then I'll stay right through Sunday, come on back, and, I like to decompress a little bit when I'm there,
Yeah.
Get like one extra day where you can sit by the pool and do nothing.
Right. You going to be barefoot most of the time?
Hell yeah.
It's LA, right?
It's LA, man. It's warm.
Didn't you walk some ridiculous amount in Brooklyn or something barefoot?
The video that I did with Chris Salim, his vlog. So if you don't know Chris Salim, he has mixdown.online. Go check out his channel. He teaches you how to record music and everything, and he makes these really fantastic vlogs as well. Stuff. And so he brought his camera, and he was like. In fact, it was great because I knew I was like, thank God I don't have to try and make a vlog because I'm hanging out with a guy who's going to do such a better job than me. All I have to do is just try and be in his vlog.
Exactly. And you walked around barefoot in New York for like a whole afternoon or something, right? Yeah.
So we finished the day. We were up at AES, then we went down to Chinatown for dinner, and then we were trying to figure out how to get back to Brooklyn. And we were just like, well, let's just start walking. Next thing you know, we walked 6 miles from Chinatown all the way back to Brooklyn. And I actually was wearing flip-flops, and it's actually uncomfortable for me to walk a lot in flip-flops. I'd rather walk barefoot. So I was walking barefoot, feeling great, having a good time. At one point in the video, I looked down and I was like, my God, this city street is really disgustingly dirty. This might not be a good choice. And I don't know if there's a correlation, but the very next day I woke up and I was sick for the sex.
I think there's a correlation, dude. Wow.
Hey, what doesn't kill you?
That's right. That's right. Lij, all right, what's the best way for people to find you, man?
Please come check out my recordingstudiorockstars.com. You can come give a listen to my podcast as well. Larry's going to be on there soon.
Oh, am I?
Yeah, we got to work on that. Yeah.
Oh boy.
And then come check out the podcast if you want. I've got videos on YouTube as well. My website for the studio is thetoyboxstudio.com. And you please go take a look and check it out. You can see more pictures of the console there. And stereosessions.com. You can watch the videos that we did from there. And then last but not least is savehomestudios.com. So if you want to keep up with the story of what's going on there, I have linked all the articles that are happening. Like they've been in the network news, newspapers, different articles. I'm just trying to like collect all the links and put them there. And if you want to share anything, please use hashtag Save Home Studios. We'll just see if we can get this thing stirred up and make a change for everybody.
Absolutely, man. And one last thing, you have through Recording Studio Rockstars, you have like a free mixing course, course, right?
Thank you for helping doing my marketing for me.
Of course.
If you are interested in learning more about mixing, I do have a free video course that'll teach you how to mix music using stock plugins, and kind of takes you on a walkthrough of me mixing one of my instrumental songs, American Winter, off of my record Skadoosh. And that is at mixmasterbundle.com.
Boom. There you go.
Boom indeed. So rule number 1, don't give people 5 call to actions, but I just did.
You did. You gave us like 7 different places to find you. I love it. Dude, this has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm super psyched to hang with you in Nashville. Well, yeah, one day in Nashville.
Yeah, well, Summer NAMM. You come to Summer NAMM, right?
I don't know. This was my first NAMM right now, so
You're coming, dude.
I guess I'm coming. I'm coming. But I also think maybe I got to get on the Bonnaroo tip.
Come on down to Bonnaroo, man.
Put me to work, dude.
Come shoot all the video.
Done. Are you hiring?
We'll figure that out. I don't have any money. Well, thank you, Larry. What a pleasure it is hanging out with you on Roadie Free Radio, man. I love it.
Thank you, dude. And I look forward to your next episode, and I look forward to hanging with you in Anaheim.
Also, for those listening, you can't see the video, but right behind Larry is a collection of really sweet guitars, which reminds me, you and I need to jam soon, dude.
We do need to jam. That Nashville trip.
Jams.
I'm coming to Nashville.
Kick out the jams, motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what we should do? We should find a booth in NAMM and sit down and play.
Let's do it. You know, when I go to Summer NAMM here, I used to have a tradition when I got to the end of everything and I'd done all the work and I was tired of work, and I would always go by the banjo booth and pick up what I like to refer to as my retirement banjos, and just sit down and just like play banjo for like 45 minutes and then roll out.
I can't play shit worth a banjo, but I'll pick up a guitar and we'll sit there and rock out.
All right, sweet, man. Looking forward to it, man.
Thank you very much, Lij. I appreciate it. What a cool dude. Lij Shaw, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure to have you. Stay tuned next week, my friends. Episode number 83. We are going to rebroadcast our special panel discussion from the NAMM show. That'll be pretty awesome. And you can follow us in the meantime at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube, all as Roadie Free Radio. Check out the website, roadiefreeradio.com. Send me a note. You know I want to hear from you. It's info@roadiefreeradio.com. And in the meantime, you all be safe out there. No roadies, no rock and roll.